G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. I want to talk about the origins of selfie culture, particularly the very first selfie that was ever taken. Now, most people think that selfies began with mobile phones when they first got cameras in them in the early 2000s. However, I'm going to show you a selfie that I took in 1976. There it is. I was 15 years old. I was at the boarding school. I just received a brand new camera as a present from my parents who'd been overseas on a holiday, and I was trying it out. I was seeing what you could do with it. I no longer have the camera, so I've taken the liberty of making a couple of sketches of it. So we've got a front elevation and a top view looking down on it, and this is the camera closed up. Here's what it looked like when you opened the camera ready for use. One of the first things to point out is that the shutter release button was mounted on top of the camera. And the only way to avoid shaking or twisting the camera while releasing the shutter was to squeeze from both sides. At least that was what I discovered. So anyway, I was wandering around playing with the new camera, seeing what there was to photograph. And because it was night time, I was using a flash cube. A funny little thing with 4 reflectors pointing in 4 different directions, 4 little glass bulbs full of a really long, really thin magnesium wire. To prevent red eye, it sat atop a pylon and it mounted on the camera like so. What it taught me was the limitations of inadequate lighting. This is an attempt to get a picture of the inside of the dormitory at night. I think there were probably 40 or 50 of us sleeping in the one room. And this is my, well, technically it was a sports locker, but I called it a food locker. And as you can see, there's a telescope stashed in there as well. And compared to the 1950s vintage Kodak box Brownie, which I used to make this photograph of Bosco House, the dormitory I was assigned to, and this one of my bedside locker and the bed, I considered the Ag for 110 Instamatic was pretty high-tech, very shiny bit of gear. And after making this photograph, I was wondering, now what can I do? I've got one more bulb left in the flash cube and there's one more frame left on the roll of film. And it occurred to me that my arms were long enough that I should be able to turn the camera around and point it at myself. And as long as the flash didn't wash everything out, and as long as I didn't wriggle the camera, I might be able to actually take a portrait of myself with no help from anybody. And that's what I did. A 1976 self-portrait on chemical film with an Ag for 110 Instamatic and a flash cube. So there you go, and now you know. And if you have a problem with selfie culture, don't go blaming the poor little millennials who got cameras in their cell phones in 2000 or so. The mug who thought up the idea of photographing oneself, that was me in 1976. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Voila! Not as silly as I look, eh? Ciao.